This is the Art Zone.
Welcome to Art Zone, a series dedicated to art and artists in the Rockford area. In this episode, we'll visit landscape architect Thomas Graceffa and photographer Nels Akerland and view their work, Liquid Landscapes. We'll also preview two shows for Art Scene 95, Kevin Orth at Rockford College and Alexander Lieberman at Rockford Art Museum.
Hi, I'm Doc Slavkowski, and this is the Art Zone. We're coming to you from J.R. Kortman Center for Design downtown in the heart of Rockford's cultural district. A unique art exhibition at the Kortman Gallery blends the talents of landscape architect Thomas Graceffa and architectural photographer Nels Akerland. We'll talk to them about their show entitled Liquid Landscapes, which highlights the water features of the beautiful La Paloma Gardens in northeast Rockford. La Paloma, a phenomenal private garden, is the labor of love of Karen and Ben Harding, who have graciously permitted us to tape on location in the gardens. Then we'll take you to the Rockford College Art Gallery, where we'll talk to Chicago artist Kevin Orth as he assembles an installation to be featured in the 1995 Rockford art scene. Then Scott Snyder of the Rockford Art Museum takes us on a tour of the Alexander Lieberman exhibition. The Lieberman exhibition is also a part of the 1995 art scene, which takes place every year in Rockford the first Friday and Saturdays of October, and it involves more than 20 galleries holding simultaneous openings. So sit back and enjoy the show. And by the way, welcome to our first show of our fourth season of the Art Zone. The Art Zone comes to La Paloma Gardens to talk with landscape architect Thomas Graceffa and architectural photographer Nels Akerland. We're going to talk about La Paloma Gardens and get a brief tour, and also talk about their show Liquid Landscapes at the Kortman Gallery. Karen and Ben Harding, right, are the owners of the garden. Did they approach you with specific concepts in mind, or do they say, here, we want... How does that work? How does the creative process work?
Well, we've worked with this garden for probably 7 years, and we, I guess, first started here in about 1988, 1989, and over the course of that, there's probably been at least 2 or 3 major pushes for doing things. This latest one is probably the easiest to relate to. We were asked to come up with some ideas from really a blank slate for this piece of ground that we're sitting on. It's the house that's next to their original residence, which they purchased, and it has a very steep sloping north-facing hill. And they had some ideas where they wanted to sort of expand the water theme and make it a little bit more pronounced, and so we developed the idea of a woodland stream and what's called a rill, a little stream that runs through woods, and expanded upon that. And so it was really here's the blank slate. Here's what we'd like to give you. What can you do with it? Other phases of the garden have been a little more specific, where we've tried to accomplish a specific goal: screening the noise on Spring Creek waterfall. Including pond for aquatics and ducks and geese and that sort of thing. So there's been some specific goals at times, or how do we get from here to there with a certain kind of walk or stairway, and we can satisfy those. This one was particularly fun because it was really a wide open, what should we do type situation.
I would like for you to tell us about landscape architecture and how it relates, or do you relate it, to the fine arts?
I think there's a pretty close relation to the fine arts in that, especially from the training standpoint, we take a lot of courses related to art, drawing, painting, really kind of a broad-based relationship. But I think when you're talking to any designer, you're talking about the basics of art: rhythm, proportion, color, mass, contrast. And we have to pay attention to all that, and it's not until all those things are working that you have a really successful project. So yeah, I think it relates very closely to it. We have to infuse enough science in it so that things do function, and they cost the right amount of money, and and they fit with people's needs, but there's definitely a close relationship to the artistic side of things.
Now, this is a unique collaboration, and this is in reference to Liquid Landscapes, which is a show at the Kortman Gallery. How did this all come about?
The garden itself?
Well, no, your participation in the show.
Well, Nels Akerland had been photographing the garden for us with the intention of recording what has been done and perhaps submitting it to some awards situations. And he approached me and saying that there's a possibility of collaborating and doing this combined show of perhaps showing how these gardens are created with drawings and with photographs and things along the way. So we're real happy to participate in it, and I think it was sort of a unique combination of his work and our technical aspect of this.
Well, it kind of came about when Tom hired me to photograph the gardens for him, and with the interest from J.R. Kortman in doing a show with my work, it seemed like it'd be a perfect thing. There has not been a show to my knowledge in this area where we have an actual designer and then a photographer combined, showing in a sense the before and after, and I guess a little of the middle of how it all came about. So it was a unique concept.
So when you come in to the gardens, for instance, with your camera, do you have sort of free range in what you photograph, or being this is somewhat of a commission, obviously they're site-specific? Is that correct? Or?
Yes and no. Tom had a definite idea of what he wanted and what he wanted to show with my photographs, and he hired me, hopefully, for my creative aspect. So in a sense, I did have free rein, but I had to have some control so I could show what Tom wanted me to show.
How do you convey to the people who actually do the work in the garden, the physical work, how do you convey the image or the finished product to them? Is it like through drawings? How specific are those drawings?
In this case, there were some concept sketches done and some detail areas figured out, and then we went to the best contractors we could that could literally think on their feet. We really were intensively here daily, all day long, really, with the contractors designing as it was being built. We had set certain levels and situations where we had to get to, and then did the adaptations day by day to make it work. So there were no full set of complete plans, and we just stood back and watched it happen. This was very hands-on by the owners and by our office.
Do you have a green thumb?
I'm pretty tired of gardening by the time I get home, so I have gardens, I would call it, at home, but they're very small, they're very easy to maintain, and luckily I have teenage children that can take care of it. So
you don't really ever get too much physically involved in a project. I mean, as far as getting your fingernails dirty or anything, it's more from the design standpoint.
That's traditionally the way it was. This one we were pretty dirty. We were in here quite a bit. I think in the last 10-15 years we've seen people pay a lot more attention to landscape architecture, both from the residential side all the way through the commercial industrial side, and we want to continue doing leading work wherever we can, and to try to get all of our people in our office. So this isn't all my work here, this is a lot of the guys in the office, to keep them involved in community activities and to keep everybody aware of where the developers and planners are making things happen in our region here, and try to influence that positively. So it has to be very general, because each 4 or 5 years we try to look at some specific trends, and they end up changing. But I think this heightened awareness of people towards the environment, we have to continue to educate our clients when they come to us of this is important to do because it saves water, it helps create a better environment for the living creatures around here that we're constantly displacing. So just really making people pay attention to the natural environment is probably a key element.
Is there a difference photographing manipulated nature compared to normal natural surroundings?
Yes, I mean this was easy because I have a path to walk down to, this stream that everyone at the opening of the show said, where is this at? Is it in Colorado, Wyoming? They weren't familiar as to what was going on. So in that sense, access was much easier. But Tom was very successful in his designs because he wanted to look like it was natural, even though it was manipulated. So there is some differences. But it was, I think access is probably the biggest thing.
How about like dealing with light, and does that make it difficult? I mean, because you do a lot of work in nature photography. For instance, you're working on a book right now that's going to be coming out in October. Is it frustrating when you're going out to take a photograph and the light isn't right? And I mean, you must be obviously patient, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, there's a lot of pre-planning. I spent many mornings in the gardens here before sunrise, setting up, waiting just for the light to be very flat and even like it is now. Other times I needed full, bright, contrasty sun. So it takes a lot of pre-planning. I use my compass a lot to pre-visualize where the sun is going to be. So to answer your question, yes, it does take a lot of patience. This is really, the landscape architecture, this is really one of the first jobs that I have done in strictly landscape architecture. I specialize in architectural photography, which is of buildings, interiors, exteriors. So this was a added twist for me. And
so you do
I've really enjoyed it.
those sharp images of new buildings with that crisp blue sky in the background, right?
Yes.
So you have to wait for that day.
Exactly. So, I mean, sometimes I'm out of luck if I'm doing exteriors and we have marginal weather. I'd have to go do an interior or do something else.
So tell us about your book now. Describe it, the title, and what the
Well, the
book
book is called Our Rock River, and it is a coffee table photography book that focuses on the entire Rock River, which obviously is Rockford and all the other communities on the Rock River. It's their best natural resource, and it's the reason that they're there. The book will cover the entire length of the river, which is about 310 miles, starting at the Horicon Marsh and going down to the Mississippi at Rock Island. We cover every town. We have historical photographs. The text is from founding fathers to modern day, so it really gives a insight as to what the river was, where it came from, and where it's going.
Now, what was the inspiration for this?
There's several reasons. First off, I have done a lot of kayaking in my life. I did the Mississippi River a few years ago. I was the youngest person to solo that, and I've always had the freedom as a single man to kind of go and do these trips and different photography shoots as I pleased. But I was recently married about a year ago, and I knew if I went and did the Colorado River, so to speak, for a month or two, I'd probably come back and my wife wouldn't be there. So, and being a Rockford native, it was the perfect thing. Again, it's Rockford's most beautiful natural resource, and I don't think it's gotten the credit that it deserves. Real enjoyment, I think, was actually taking the photographs. I was outside for the whole year shooting it. I got to do a lot of creative photography. There were times when I'd be in the river with waders on, with my camera waiting for the right light. So there's a lot of exciting aspects to it.
Wow. So you really got into the offbeat areas of the river. And
yes, I had to get into the offbeat areas because, for example, down in Grand Detour, there is a rock that's about 80 feet tall, and it's the biggest rock on the river, and it is behind an island. So normally you wouldn't see it going down the main channel. So we had to get into there. So that was really the reason we kayaked the river, is to educate ourselves.
Well, I hope it all works out for you.
I think it will. It'll be carried at every bookstore in Rockford.
And when will we see it?
We will see it September 22nd will be when it's first available.
Can you, just in closing, talk about any goals or new challenges that you're facing and how you look for your work to progress as time goes on?
Well, I feel right now that I'm on just the tip of the iceberg. I've really done well with my architectural photography. This book, I think, will be a very big success for me, and I would like to continue on with books. I have a couple of options with subjects for books coming up. One is a coffee table book on ice fishing, of all things. There's a company that wants to hire me to do that, and different rivers. So I just hope to continue on the way I'm going.
Hi, I'm Sharon Petrie, and you're tuned into the Art Zone.
Let me tell you a story, friends, about old King Orthy and his Cathedral of the Dreams. He built that cathedral every day. Every day of his life, whether he knew it or not, he was building his Cathedral of the Dreams. And you know what the biggest secret in the world is? You can too.
Okay, the Art Zone comes to the Clark Arts Center, Rockford College Art Gallery, and we're talking with artist, you're a Chicago artist, right? Kevin Orth, and you're working on an installation here and also a performance, and this exhibition will run through October 7th, which is the art scene, so it'll be up for the month of September of 1995 and then through October 7th for the art scene. Tell us a little bit about what this is. First, give us the title, because I couldn't repeat that.
The show is called Love from King Orthy's Cathedral of the Dreams, Art, Words, and Music of Kevin Orth. And it's a show that involves a bunch of the different things I do, which is I started out as a writer and was a freelance journalist and editor for years, but also wrote poetry and did performances and things like that. And I play a bunch of instruments, keyboard instruments, accordions, things like that. But I make my living as a visual artist now. And so this is one of the shows I've done where I'm using all those things. Some of the paintings have words on them and, combine art and words. And for the opening, I'm going to be doing some original music and performing, original texts and then doing an installation here that uses sound and sculpture and painting. So it's a mix of, it's kind of like a jambalaya of all the things I do.
So there are things, what we see here, you're not set up yet, you're still in the process of putting this together, but what we see in the room here are things all over on the tables. How do you know where everything goes?
Well, it's something that you kind of, it's like cooking, you use the ingredients and you kind of try and get the mix just right. And I do it a little different every time, but you try and get the balance. You really build a new piece every time, and you can't sit down and draw it out because you can't tell once you get in the space. This whole space right here is really the equivalent of the piece of paper when you're doing a drawing. So you're building it in the space. It's like you're drawing in the space, and it's like making a new piece. You form everything and you change the lights around. So it takes a lot of it takes more thinking than actually than doing.
How interrelated are the pieces? Like, do you look at them each as an individual work of art that happens to be working off of another piece, or do they not work alone as pieces?
Right. Well, they do both. Some of them are particularly strong by themselves. They might have a base. It might be a particularly good piece, one that's better than the others, that's set up more to be a solo piece. But they all play off each other, and it's one of these things, once you get more and more, it starts to get not only the interaction of them, but the shape. When you have 20, 30, 40, 50 things and you move by them, it's like driving by buildings. It gets a kinetic quality too.
Other than you're the artist, what is, though, the relationship between the music, the words, all of these things? Is there a theme? Because the title does not exactly tell us that. What is it? What is it that we should be learning from this exhibition?
Well, first of all, I would suggest that everyone actually come and see it, which is the best way, because you can't reproduce on tape or on pictures exactly what it looks like. But there are a bunch of themes that pop up in both the words, the art, and the music. One of them is actually what I have on my shirt right here, which says Reclamation and Transformation, which is a show I did in Chicago with two colleagues of mine who are very good artists. And those two artists are Mr. Imagination and David Philpott. And it was a show about taking urban objects, whether it's junk trees, the ailanthus tree, which David Philpott uses, or bottle caps, parts of brooms, metal, and that Mr. Imagination uses, or I use bottles, hubcaps, scrap wood, and it's reclaiming these objects and transforming them and raising up what are seen as junk junk or mundane objects into works of art. And so this idea of transformation is something that you hear in the music, I hope, and can see in the work and read about in the words.
Okay, thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
We're talking to Maureen Gustafson. She's gallery director here at the Clark Art Center at Rockford College. And tell us about the show, how it all came about, okay?
Thank you. We're really excited about this show, and it came about through a meeting a few years ago. I'm a part of a rather broad network of people who are interested in the arts. It includes collectors, artists, historians, historic preservationists, and even conservationists. And I was made aware of Kevin's work a few years ago when a friend gave me one of his bottle sculptures with a St. Christopher medal on it as a gift, and kind of a good luck gift. And I found it really very interesting, and a little while later I met Kevin and had an opportunity to visit his studio. Thought his work was very exciting. So we're really pleased to have Kevin here, to have him creating one of his shrines for us, and also to do a performance which includes some other interests that he has, his ability to write and to create poetry, and his ability to create music.
Doodle 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 wah! Hi, we're the cast of Forever Plaid, and you're watching The Art Zone.
The Art Zone now is in the midst of the Alexander Lieberman exhibition at the Rockford Art Museum, and this is running in September and October of 1995. And this exhibit is also part of the 1995 Rockford art scene. We're talking with acting curator of exhibition.
That's right.
All right. This is Scott Snyder with the Rockford Art Museum. Tell us a little bit about the Lieberman exhibit here.
Well, what we have, Lieberman, as many Rockford people know him through his sculpture Symbol, which is located in Sinisippi Gardens. This show that we have inside shows other aspects of the artist's career. Within this show, we have 33 years of the artist's work. It's a survey of these years.
What's fascinating here is to see his work in a museum setting, because so many people are just familiar with his work as a large-scale sculptures that are not only in Rockford but throughout the world. What would you say as far as his three-dimensional work as opposed to his two-dimensional work? How do they relate to each other? Because to me, I do not see that relationship.
Well, the broad-based relationship would be that he's an abstract expressionist. You know, his work is abstract. It's not figurative in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, and that's something that I did not see there, but I guess I do now, because I guess you expect the work to kind of look the same. Like, for instance, the colors that he's using here, these bright oranges, or they call it Lieberman red, I take it. Mm-hmm. That's used on most of his sculptural work. Does not appear that often in his two-dimensional work. Can you talk about that as far as color goes?
Well, he uses other colors in his sculptures too. He works with just raw metal material, rusted metal. He works in bronze, aluminum, white, painted metal, and black. So there are other, besides the Lieberman red, that he uses. You don't see the colors in his paint. He uses it in sculpture. He talks in the video, the excerpts that you'll see, he talks about how in a space, in a public art space, or in a public sculpture space, you know, downtown or within office buildings, you need a color to break the space, to break the patterns of the buildings, and thus he thought red was an ideal color to invade the space and really make the sculpture stand out as a unique element within a space.
We're going to hear from Mr. Lieberman himself from some video that was done of his work and his feelings, right, as an artist. And then why don't you now take us on this tour and point out this, I guess it's sort of a chronological order here to the way the pieces were hung. And before we do that, though, tell me about that. How difficult is it when you get works like this? Obviously, it's up to you to decide where the placement of all the pieces are. How much thought goes into that, and how much is related to some chronological order, or is it have to do with visually appealing? Or
well, since we had 33 years of the artist, it seemed, since we wanted to do some didactic information, some written information on the artist. We wanted it easy for the public to take the information about the artist and follow along through the artist's career. So in laying out this show, it just happened that was the best layout. You see stylistic changes as you go on through the years, through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then he comes back full circle, which I'll show you in a moment, to an image that he is working with early in the 60s.
Okay, let's go look at the work.
Okay. Okay. This piece here is entitled Full Circle. It was done in 1993. And as I mentioned before, this is the beginning and ending, as you walk through the chronological two-dimensional works here in the museum. He returned to the circle, which is an image he used in some of his earlier works, these pieces in the 1960s. Here, when he was working in a hard edge period, this hard edge abstraction, he was actually quite ahead of his time, and it's noted in some critics' notes that had he stayed in this style, he would be, much more famous than he already is. Yeah, I showed you how the hard edge paintings in the circle, that started breaking down. It started expanding. He got more gestural with his paint to the point where he started now working with this V imagery. And he talks about this V, this upward motion, being a spiritual painting. It's elevating the spirit. So that's what the symbol of the V means.
And we see also a lot more color now coming into the work.
A lot more color, a lot more play in the brush stroke. It's very loose and very gestural.
And now over here.
Here, slowly, as you walk through the exhibit, you see the V image break down to the point of being pure abstraction. And these paintings here, this is a piece untitled from the Storm King series, which is done in 1977. This is acrylic on canvas, and there's no representational imagery within this. He looked for the pure art form as the gesture, the brushstroke, the movement as you create the artwork is what he thought was the purest art. And so he experimented for quite a while in this phase. Okay. Following in Lieberman's concerns with abstract expressionism, he started working in different materials as well, keeping true to form, very abstract, very loose gestural canvas. But here in this, this is actually a triptych, 3 panels. He incorporated sand into the canvas. Just a very beautiful painting. And we have 3 of these of this series. He used ground marble and adhered it with plastic or a lacquer to the canvas. And you see this form here slowly turns on to the next series that he worked, which is this gate series. This piece, Gate 3, was done in 1981. Now he's come back into an image, a symbology, personal symbology, to create, an entrance, a penetration into another dimension or a spiritual plane. That, he drifted in and out of pure abstraction and then having some sort of form introduced in his abstract art.
Well, symbol has that aspect of a gateway in a way, the idea of the two. Mm-hmm. I do see a relationship here between and symbol, and we're talking roughly the same years now. Are we getting close to the years?
Yeah, symbol was 78, this is 81, so you see that image, evolving. I don't know if symbol was an inspiration for that. I think a general theme is the purity, bringing art down to its purest elements, form, gesture, line, and seeing the beauty within that form, as almost a spiritual movement, spiritual for the artist to create this and, to give an experience, whether it be spiritual or emotional, for the audience to see these paintings.
I've always been a painter. I started with realistic paintings and moved towards abstraction. First through pointillist visions of Venice, out of which emerged the first abstractions, then the circle forms, which were an extreme simplification, and the circle forms were an attempt to create a language of painting that would not rely on the illusions of perspective. From the circle paintings, as I progressed, I broke out into what I would call cosmological space. I always felt that the painting that interested me had to deal with the grander reality which is beyond this earth. Little by little, this explosion from the circle into outer space, a cosmic space, and later from the triangle, which was also a symbolic shape, into a much freer use of the hand, of the stroke, that perhaps subconsciously tried to express inner states of feeling.
In addition to the Lieberman exhibition, we also have 2 other shows going on for Art Scene Weekend. We have in our lower level gallery, the Anderson Gallery, Thought Manifested, which is selections from our permanent collection. And we also have Preston Jackson in our cooler gallery, which is adjacent to the Funderburg Gallery. Preston's is a regional artist. He lives in Peoria, and he is the chair of the Art Institute in Chicago. He is one of the most prolific artists I know. He creates so much work, and he's also a jazz musician, very involved in many things. In this exhibition, you'll see samples of his 2-dimensional works, very realistic, very narrative, and also 3D bronzes and aluminum pieces of life-size to smaller totemic pieces. Very interesting work, very highly charged narrative. So I thank you for coming, Doc.
Oh, thanks for having us here. It's a real interesting contrast, too, between the Preston Jackson and the Alexander Lieberman. And we'd like to show you around the Preston Jackson exhibit, and we'll do that while we show you the credits for the Art Zone. We hope you enjoyed watching the show. We'd like to thank everybody who's been on the show. If you have any questions or comments, please stop in at J.R. Kortman Center for Design, 107 North Main, downtown, or give us a call at 968-0123. Once again, thanks for watching the Art Zone. This is the Art Zone. This is the Art Zone.
Art Zone is funded by J.R. Kortman Center for Design, downtown.
This is the Art Zone.